You're listening to the Talking Headways Podcast Network.
Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on.
Happy Monday. This is Mondays at the Red Wire, sponsored by our super generous Patreon supporters. I'm Jeff Wood, your host, and joined by Han Solo. That's right. Every Wookiee's favorite right-hand man is here to share the news on cities. We'll have guests next time. I promise. I've got them set up already. So next week, or next 2 weeks from now, we just stopped doing. And actually, the guests that are coming on are actually pertinent to that information that we do it every 2 weeks instead of every week. Chrissy Mancini-Nichols will be on, and Tracy McMillan will be on. And those are my co-hosts from the pandemic when we did this show every week and then got really tired of doing a Monday show every week because I was doing a Thursday show and a Monday show. It's a lot of work, especially when I'm doing the newsletter. But they'll be on in 2 weeks is my hope. And I have them scheduled in. And so hopefully everybody makes it through and gets in on the 23rd, I believe it is. So mark your calendars. Next time we're going to have guests, and it's going to be awesome. Yeah, so as we usually do when we're talking on Solo, we have some information about the Talking Headways podcast that we had on before. So our annual prediction show with Yona Freemark was on the feed now. Both episodes, episode 1, where we talk about some transit stuff, history, and things like that, some of Yona's work, and then also the prediction show, which is episode 2. Those are both on the podcast feed. Also, Chris and Melissa Brundtland were on the show before that to talk about their book, Women Changing Cities. Lots of great stuff in that book. Always great to talk to Chris and Melissa. It was super fun conversation. I keep using the stuff that they talked about too, and some of the things that, especially like tomorrow's intro to the newsletter, I have some stats from their book. So it's a wonderful, wonderful piece to read, and I hope folks have been able to pick it up. Also, we chatted with Jeremy Wells, who I think this Thursday's episode is going to be with Jeremy. He's coming on to talk about historic preservation and his book, Managing the Magic of Old Places. And whoa, I didn't realize that historic preservation was such a mess. You'll want to hear that one coming on Thursday. There's a lot of folks in the historic preservation field that do not operate in the same way that the planning field does, where it's people first, for the most part anyways. Fascinating stuff. We also chatted with some great folks last Thursday, and it'll be out in a couple weeks, from St. Louis, Vanessa Cooksey and Chris Hansen, about St. Louis's revitalized neighborhood that supports a vibrant art scene. Lots of great economic development discussions in there. That was really fun to chat with them. Stephen Krim of the New York MTA will be on to talk more about congestion pricing. I'm super excited about that one. I've got to meet Stephen at Impact this year in Portland and chat for a bit. And so he's a great person. And I'm really looking forward to chatting with him about some more stuff on congestion pricing, which is one of my favorite new policy tools. We're also working on some good shows where we have scheduled folks that are going to come in and talk about TOD. Our good friend Laurel Paget-Seekins is scheduled to come into the studio as well. We'll talk about used e-bikes. We'll talk about urban logistics. We'll talk about even more. I have some requests out for books and things like that. So as always, we've got a lot to talk about. Lots on the burner, including on the book pile as well. So we keep on moving forward. And as I mentioned, next in 2 weeks, Chrissy and Tracy are coming on the show. They're scheduled to come on, and so I'm super excited to have them back too. And hopefully, you guys are excited too. I know you will be. They're always fun to talk to. It's always fun to hear other people's perspective on the news as well. And also, so now segue to our advertising. And again, if you are a Patreon supporter and you are a supporter at $1 a month or more, you get this podcast ad-free through the Patreon app, through Patreon and the feed that's generated for your subscription specifically. So I want to thank folks who have signed up. I've had a number of folks sign up, and also I thank everybody for listening to the show. If you don't go through the Patreon app, I mean, you're listening to the ads. I put a couple of ads in the center of the episodes these days if they're super long. Last week's Yona episode I didn't because it was a shorter one, but yeah, that's how we pay the bills. That's how we pay for the hosting. That's how we pay for Sophia to do the editing of the Thursday show and things like that. So really, really, really thank you for everybody who supports the show through Patreon and also by listening. And thanks to everybody who's ordered Buster Bike scarves. If you'd like to order one, just go to theoverheadwire.com or email me at theoverheadwire@gmail.com. Again, I always love the pictures folks are sending me from events and rallies. And Philip sent me one this last week of him and his bus-only scarf at the Philadelphia Flower Show. That is amazing. Appreciate that. And so I've mentioned this a few times before. I'm looking at it right now, this little design I have of a train scarf, high-speed rail scarf. And so we're working on that. I know I said it like several years ago that I do it, but life gets in the way, things get in the way. I'm working on it. I'm looking at the drawing right now in front of me. It's not very good because it's a sketch with pencil, but we'll get it there. And as we always note, as I noted before, we all really thank everybody who's supporting the show, whether that's on Patreon or buying books off the bookshop site, bookshop.org/shop/theoverheadwire. You go to that page and you can buy any book you want. Just do it through our page and we get a couple of dollars for that purchase. Also, folks are ordering Cars Are Cholesterol t-shirts and merch and things they can dream up with that cool Cars Are Cholesterol logo that Richard Wazinski designed. Lots of cool stuff there as well. Go to bit.ly/carsarecholesterol and you can get the purple shirts. The purple shirts are the best ones. Also those things they make great gifts. I know that there's been a number of gifts that I've sent out recently to other folks who are getting scarves and bike only scarves for gifts. They're ordered for Christmas gifts and other things. Appreciate that too. And I really wish I could see people's faces when they get them and they didn't expect them. That'd be really fun. We also suggest folks sign up for our newsletter. We've got a new YouTube explainer up talking about how you can go through the archives. So if you have not signed up for the newsletter yet, you get a 2-week free trial. All you have to do is give me your email, no credit cards or anything required. Send me your email and sign up on theoverheadwire.com. And we'll get you that newsletter. It's been going for 20 years and hopefully we'll be going for 20 years more. I really like doing it. It's lots of fun to go through the news every single day. One thing I've thought about lately is like one time, maybe a month or something like that, just like going on a Twitch stream or something and just kind of going through how we go through the news. Would that be interesting to anybody? Or even just like a YouTube stream or something, just like figuring out maybe a way to just share how the process goes and how we look for news every single day. Because I go through about 1,500 news items and it's pretty fast. I don't know if talking about every single item would be the best idea, but maybe we could figure out a way to do it and then talk about the news with folks. That'd be fun. It seems like it'd be a good time. And also, if you haven't already, just keep on keeping on adding this to your podcatcher. Keep on keeping on, pulling us up every week. We really appreciate that. Thanks everybody for listening. And now we'll get to that show that you're waiting for. This is episode 187. We are in session. And before we get to the show, I want to mention the podcatchers again: iHeartRadio, Spotify, Overcast Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcasts, we will be. There's an RSS feed as well at streetsblog.libsyn.org or streetsblog.libsyn.com or .org, either one. You'll be able to find it, and then you'll also be able to find there all the past episodes. So yeah, the news. Here are a few stories that piqued our interest from the newsletter over the last few weeks. The newsletter is where these come from. The most popular ones get put into articles at Greater Washington, Urban Milwaukee, and Streets.mn. And if you want to syndicate the news item at the end of the week, feel free to contact me at theoverheadwire@gmail.com or wherever you find my email. And I'm more happy to post it on sites. It's just like some good content, and maybe it'll help folks kind of get through some of the interesting news that we found and that readers were really interested in the week before. So let's start here. And then this one I'm not sure as much about because I'm not a big Amtrak person or intercity passenger rail person generally, but I'd love to hear from folks about this specifically. Breaking up Amtrak. The Federal Railroad Administration has stirred some controversy by proposing to split up Amtrak into 3 different entities under a holding company. Critics worry the move could lead to privatization long wanted by conservative lawmakers, while supporters see it as a possible avenue for modernization. This was by Coco Dollenganger in The Travel. There's been a number of articles on this. I think I saw another one by the Passenger Rail Association and some others. I didn't read too deep into it, but some folks are kind of cautiously optimistic that it might be a good way forward for Amtrak, but others are worried about the privatization angle, which is always seems to be on tap from the conservative perspective. I know Republicans in Congress are always kind of going after Amtrak, trying to break off the Northeast corridor, the line that's profitable, and then the long distance lines, spin them off into their own thing and make them all the unprofitable routes under another thing. It just gets tiresome every time. I know that the Biden infrastructure works, the bipartisan infrastructure law, IIJA or whatever they want to call it these days, the last transportation bill. I know that they gave passenger rail and intercity rail a huge amount of money to make it more sustainable over the long term, but I know that that's getting chipped away. So this is interesting, and maybe this is something that we should actually have a guest on the podcast to talk about in more detail, because I don't quite understand what they're trying to do, but I know that this is a big deal right now in the discussions about Amtrak. Next up, turning rooftops into a climate shield. Zurich, Switzerland created a green roof mandate in 1991, requiring vegetation on all new renovated flat roofs. Now up to 12% of roofs in some neighborhoods are full of vegetation, with 40% of flat roofs supporting plants. Switzerland is warming faster than other places around the globe, and the hope is that these roofs will help cool the city down when warmer temperatures hit and reduce the impacts of stormwater. This is by Michaela Haas in Reasons to be Cheerful. Green roofs, great idea. Let's keep that going. The only thing I can think about, I have a flat roof here in San Francisco, and the one thing I'd be worried about is if you have a green roof, the ability to find cracks seems harder, cracks in the roof or leaks that might get into the house above. And so I'm sure there's people that have thought about that really hard and figured it out. But that would be the thing that worries me. And then also the weight. I think the weight of the plants and stuff isn't a big deal. As long as you're not planting huge trees and stuff, I don't think it's a big deal. But that's another thing, is how much can the roof handle? But it is really important for climate change and the amount of heat that's coming to have green roofs, especially if that causes an urban cooling effect. Apparently this Zurich has a lot of green roofs now, and I'm interested to see the temperatures, how much they drop, especially on hot days because of the transpiration of the plants. Really interesting. Truck pollution impacts health. A new study out of the University of Melbourne found that pollution from heavy trucks and buses costs Australians $6.2 billion in health impacts. Heavy vehicles make up 4% of the vehicle fleet nationwide, but 25% of the emissions. Researchers hope these findings will make public health part of new lawmaking surrounding heavier trucks, and that it starts a push to take some of these vehicles off the road. This is by Petra Stock in The Guardian. So I don't know necessarily if you're going to get the trucks off the road from a operational standpoint, but you could replace them with electric vehicles, with cleaner energy vehicles. I know that there's a lot of trucking that's going electric in China and other countries where they're working on it pretty heavily. But I know that today I just saw an article in the South China Morning Post talking about how China is actually building a thorium reactor for a container ship that could carry 14,000 containers. And that's wild, creating a nuclear container boat so that they can reduce emissions. And that's wild. But yeah, for trucks and stuff, obviously truck pollution is a big impact. This is a crazy stat, 4% of the fleet and 25% of the emissions. That's a huge kind of burden from the trucking perspective, and lots of health impacts as well from that. So it's good to know these data points and data sets so we can look at the alternatives. And now with the gas prices going up and down and up and down and all that stuff, it's wild that we don't have more discussions about, say, electrifying the railroads and things like that, electrifying trucking. I'm always not quite sure about battery powered things, especially over long haul and heavy things, unless it's the electrification, overhead wires and things like that for the trains. But I know that this is a discussion that's happening because people want to make sure that the truck influences and the truck impacts are reduced, especially from a public health standpoint in some of these areas where there's a lot of warehouses and a lot of trucking. Electric buses put to the test. Speaking of large vehicles that run on electricity, after rolling out a fleet of 62 electric buses in 2024, Madison, Wisconsin, with its cold winters, has been a test bed for their efficacy. So far, they have been a success, and their operation has lessons for other cities in cold climates. They found that the ability to recharge along the route at special stations and improving batteries are helpful in keeping power available throughout the whole run. Regenerative braking has been used in reducing sliding and icing conditions as well. That's really interesting. I didn't actually think about that when I first read this article. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. The regenerative braking actually could have some benefits, because if you're not hitting the brakes and the wheels are still moving, you're not necessarily going to slide as much on the ice, which is another, I guess, benefit. And also they found that by creating places where the pantograph on the bus could go up and charge for a little bit, and I think they do this in Montreal as well, they actually had a more of a charge, and they could, probably run the heaters in the buses a lot longer. I know that was a big concern early on for some of these electric buses, was that they had a diesel generator on board for the heater alone in really, really cold climates, because the battery couldn't keep up. But I think the batteries are getting better and the vehicles are getting better, and I'm sure that there's companies out there now making electric buses that'll really like fix that over time. And also recharging, because of the pantograph sticking up, and having a charge zone along the route, that would be really good. Maybe at the end of the route. That's what they found here in Madison. We'll have to have Christoph Spieler on. He's now the head of the Madison Transportation Department. So, that'd be interesting to chat with him about how this cold weather stuff is working, especially for him being from Houston in the South. Okay, next up, Euclidean zoning turns 100. In 1926, zoning, the Supreme Court decision Euclid versus Ambler Realty, changed how cities develop and grow. Now, at 100 years old, many are reconsidering the impacts of the legacy of zoning, especially around affordability around the country. Some 33 states have now have laws that reform zoning in some way to allow more than just single-family homes. This was by our friend Anthony Flint in Bloomberg CityLab. Yeah, the 100-year anniversary of Euclid versus Ambler Realty. I have this huge planning law book where that was one of the big cases that we talked about in planning school. And it's been rediscussed lately a lot. I feel like in Benjamin Schneider's book that we had him on the show recently, he talked about, and one thing I was interested to see about his work was that the case that led up to Euclid versus Ambler at the Supreme Court, the lower court case, actually said that people have an expectation that growth will happen. And I think Euclid versus Ambler often talks about zoning and the separation of uses, but it was actually, the zoning discussion is always about the separation of uses, and people worried about nuisances and things like that. But there's ways to regulate nuisances. It was really, 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 really about building single-family homes versus apartment buildings, and the classist and racist and other undertones that went with that specifically. And that's impacted the way we've grown and the way we've developed over the last 100 years. And I don't think it's been in the right direction, because we have an affordability crisis. We have a transportation crisis where people are having to drive everywhere and they don't have options that are not automobile related. Insurance rates for cars are going up because people are put at greater risk because they have to drive longer. Those types of things continue because of the legacy of zoning over 100 years ago. And if you look back to Schneider's book, or if you look back to Yoni Applebaum's book, which we had on the show, there's really clearly a discussion about what was happening in the late 1900s that was good about the densities and the ability of people to find housing when they needed it, and be able to get to their workplaces in a reasonable fashion with the transportation that existed. Now, it wasn't perfect, and there was always the problems of tenements and the folks who moved in and then moved out, and there's moving day, which Yoni talked about a lot. There's a lot of issues that needed to be addressed. But that is also a function of just building enough housing for people. Could have been social housing, could have been public housing, could have been for-profit housing that was allowed to develop over time because of zoning laws didn't exist. Obviously, in the late 19th century, early 20th century, there was a lot of housing being built, and the reformers got after it, and then the zoning came into place, and it got spread out everywhere, and then we were worse off for it, as I mentioned. Lots of good discussions about Euclid and the Euclidean zoning, as this is referred to, Euclid versus Ambler Realty, 1926, 100 years ago. I can't believe it. It's crazy. Maybe half the pavement isn't needed. A new report from the Accelerate Resistance LA states that 44% of Los Angeles' hardened spaces, including roads and driveways, may not be essential. Using parcel level analysis to map all the pavement across the city and combining it with data on heat, tree cover, and other environmental impacts, the organization believes it's possible to think of new ways to improve public health and the climate. This is by Meg Tanaka in the Los Angeles Times. There's always been this discussion about impervious cover in cities. I know Austin's had this discussion many years ago about aquifer and the recharge zone. And yeah, I think we've paved too much, and we need to green up a little bit more to make it cool. It's the same thing that we talked about earlier with the Zurich green roof discussion. We really, really do need to increase the ability of our cities to cool themselves. And one thing we can do is reduce the amount of pavement, the amount of hard surfaces that are in cities. RTD paid for service not rendered. Denver's transit agency, RTD, has been paying its operations contractor, Denver Transit Partners, millions of dollars for service it hasn't received. After finding out about the discrepancy, the agency has asked the contractor to double service on 2 passenger lines in May without incurring the agency costs because of the oversight. Since 2019, Denver Transit Partners has been paid $414 million to operate 3 electric commuter lines in the city. Bruce Finley, Denver Post. I wanted to go deeper on this because, I mean, how do you have it on a contract that you're supposed to be? I mean, I think I understand from the article why this happened, but at the same time, like, it's crazy that they have been paying for a service that they're not getting from the contractor. So what they think it happened, and what it seems to allude to in the article anyways, is that during the pandemic, lines and service was suspended because of the amount of people not riding, but also for safety measures, but also for funding issues. But the interesting thing about that necessarily is that, many of those lines came back and they're contracted to come back in the system, but some of them, I guess, did not come back, and they never checked their work or never checked the contract to see that those lines and that service levels were required. So now they're going to have, instead of 30-minute service, they'll have 15-minute service on some of these lines, the electric railway lines that they built in Fast Tracks, which we talked about recently as well, in a report that said the head of the agency, or not the head of the agency, but the head of the board said, we're not going to finish Fast Tracks. But now we know that they haven't been paying for service they're not getting. So there's lots of problems going on in Denver. But that's fascinating that they paid all this for service that they didn't get. And so hopefully, the Denver Transit Partners doesn't find out a way to litigate it, saying, well, you gave us the money, you didn't make us do it, so we get to keep the money and you are out of luck. I would not like to see that, and I hope it's ironclad that they have to come back and give more service and even maybe boost up service even more, because they, for however many years, I guess maybe 2 or 3 years, 4 years maybe since the height of the pandemic, they haven't given service they needed to. And so maybe there's 4 years worth of service in there that they can get for free for paying out all this money, $414 million to operate these 3 lines since 2019. Okay, what urban highways really cost. A new report from our friend Patrick Kennedy in Dallas has found that 66,000 acres in U.S. cities are consumed by highways, and lost property tax revenues from that space is estimated at over $5.2 billion a year. Kennedy looked at the 3-mile radius around downtowns and considers this work a follow-up to the Bragdon report, which urged President Eisenhower not to build through cities. This was by Benjamin Schneider, who we just mentioned his book in Bloomberg CityLab. The Bragdon report was basically presented to Eisenhower, and Megan Kimball found some of the reports about that in her work for her book City Limits. And what was interesting about that specifically is that, basically they were saying that Eisenhower shouldn't be, you shouldn't be going through cities, and he agreed, but it was a re-election year and Nixon was on the ballot and Nixon won, and he didn't want to, or actually Kennedy and Nixon were on the ballot. Kennedy won, and he didn't want to ruin Nixon's election chances, but eventually, that was, so he could have done it and not had any impact on history necessarily, from his perspective, but then it would have changed the history of cities going forward, as much, if not more, than the Euclid case that we just talked about. So interesting pivots in time and these off-ramps. I always talk about these off-ramps. I always talk about the off-ramps of planning and what could have happened if something else would have happened, right? If President Eisenhower had said, no, we're not going through cities, what would that have meant for neighborhoods and communities, Black communities specifically? How much would not be torn down? How much tax base would some of these cities have? How much thriving would be happening? How much transit would we have if there was no highway to get people in? How much service would there have been, and people be able to get all these places? So Really fascinating, these off ramps. Literally, in this instance is literally off ramps. Would have made a difference for cities. Cities would look totally different today. Other off ramps I think about is there's Euclid, obviously Euclid versus Ambler Realty zoning. There's the building highways through cities, the highway expansion plan. The oil crisis in the 70s. Obviously, other cities around the world actually went in different directions. The Netherlands and Denmark, obviously, go in that different direction of prioritizing bikes and active transportation, and now they look way different. So interesting historical off ramps, really fascinating. The Robinson Patman Act, the enforcement of that in the Reagan administration, that's another one. So lots of interesting off ramps. That might be actually a good story. What makes a city beautiful? New research of the built environment found that people viewing historic buildings found them comparable in scenic quality to forests and lakes. Creating scenic built environments has been shown to improve health and well-being, and this study shows that historic buildings specifically contribute to positive urban scenes. This is by Eugene Malthouse and Sydney Shearborn in The Conversation. So historic buildings are pretty, people like pretty things, and they are just as good as, for people's minds, I guess, as scenes in nature, beautiful scenes in nature. So I know that I don't think a building could be as much as going to like Yosemite for me, but there's a case to be made, I guess. Interesting stuff. So that's the main items, and there's the bonus items. These are the extra items that I have I put together that I thought folks might be interested in, and but they didn't get a lot of clicks, but that's okay. Because we publish so much stuff that I think people might be overwhelmed. That might be part of the problem, not just because people aren't interested in them. There's so much news every day. It can be overwhelming to anybody. Traffic tickets in San Francisco has shot up to 124,000 in 2025 after a long lull. Just 26,000 tickets were issued before 33 speed cameras were installed around the city. Officials believe citations might go down once camera locations are noted, but SFMTA has the ability to move them to any high injury corridor. This was in the San Francisco Chronicle. Now that we have automated enforcement, our traffic tickets are going back up. I think there's been a lot of discussion about the police in San Francisco basically stopping people, and then people driving crazy, and then more dangerous driving is happening, and more death and destruction as people have been able to speed with impunity. Now we have automated enforcement. It makes it easier for tickets to be issued for people speeding throughout the city. And so 124,000 tickets, that's a lot. And I'm wondering what the revenue of that's generated. Obviously, it doesn't matter what the revenue is as long as the speeding reductions are keeping people safe. But it does make a difference, and it has mattered. It has reduced speeds, and it's been really impressive. Professor Carrie Fang looks into economic development corruption and believes it might be more common than we think. After a case where the FBI set up a sting on economic development officials in Tallahassee, Florida, the public information available has created a starting point to find out. This was in the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. Yeah, so Dr. Fang, it's really interesting. She basically put together this paper and this research based on all this stuff from the court case, and now she's looking into the corruption of economic development around the country. And I can guarantee you, with all the money that changes hands for these data centers and everything else, it's probably maddening to know that there's some greased palms and money changing hands that maybe shouldn't, and negative outcomes happening because of it. And interesting that somebody's finally latched onto this as a research topic and focusing on it. Interesting stuff. A Hail Mary deal by DART board in Dallas to keep suburban cities from leaving the agency may move forward. DART would move to return funds to 13 of its member cities and restructure the board to give Dallas less seats. This has been KERA News. So basically a bunch of cities were threatening to leave DART because they felt like they weren't getting value for their money on the transit service that they were paying for through their 1-cent sales tax. And the state of Texas is kind of to blame for this because they put a cap on how much sales tax you can actually generate for transportation in the region. They're capped at 1 cent. And so if your 1 cent goes to transit, it can't go to other things. And so cities are always grumpy about not being able to get that money. And now, Dallas and DART are going to have to apparently give back money to some of these cities to do improvements, I guess, build roads and stuff like that. And now they're restructuring the board, so Dallas is going to have less seats. So the main population center in North Texas, on the eastern side of it anyways, obviously Fort Worth is on the western side, is going to lose money, and they're going to lose board seats, and they're going to lose influence. And so my guess is that transit might get worse because they're not going to have the understanding that the density of the place and the bus service, proximate to that makes sense. And then they built all these light rail lines that go to these suburban locales. They built suburb to suburb light rail lines and commuter rail lines and things like that. And I don't know if those were such a great idea to begin with, but we'll see. We'll see how this turns out. I don't really like it. I don't like this idea that Dallas is giving its power. If anything, Dallas should have just said, okay, see you later. Bye-bye tax base. We'll, make our own thing. And then they wouldn't have had to serve those outlying areas that are car dependent anyways. I think part of the problem is that they built some of these light rail lines to these places. And so shutting off service there was a station there to remind people that they should be getting service for what they paid. That might be part of the problem, but Dallas, lots of stuff going on, and built environment. It's a zoning problem again, and go back to Euclid and sprawl and leapfrog growth and all that stuff. And here we are with Dallas losing money and seats to surrounding areas that probably don't care as much about transit as they do. New research looking at tree distributions in cities found a consistent link between wealth and tree abundance near sidewalks. This clear connection shows how current inequities impact public health outcomes and from heat, and that tree placement should be an important part of infrastructure discussions. This is MIT News. In Nashville, new traffic signals have been cut bus travel times 5%. The transit signal priority will be expanded to more streets around the city after the success. This was in the Nashville Tennessean. When all 4 phases of development are finished in a Squamish redevelopment project next to Vancouver, BC, 8 buildings as high as 58 stories will have more than 9,000 units, many of them for low-income residents. But the project is now not without local controversy from those who oppose the project. This was in the Globe and Mail. This is behind a paywall. So what's interesting about this one is that basically the Squamish Nation, First Nations peoples, they had their land taken from them from early settlers in Vancouver. And the courts said a few decades ago that was wrong and not correct, and so they should be able to get some of that land back. And now they have the rights to do whatever they want with it outside of the planning jurisdiction of the city of Vancouver. And so now they're building tall towers, and they're building tall towers just outside of downtown Vancouver. And the NIMBYs are not happy about it, not happy at all. But I think it's actually a great idea. It's a great way to show that this type of development can work, and they're protecting their people. They're giving their people, housing. They're figuring out a way to get value back from the land that they've owned for so many years that was taken from them. And it's gonna be interesting to see what pans out, and how that those 9,000 residents and 58-story buildings, how that pans out in terms of what it does for the region as a whole. I mean, that's an amazing amount of people in a small amount of space. And so there's not a lot of provision of transportation that needs to happen. I think they're on a SkyTrain route. So, cool, go for it. And maybe other Native American nations, First Nations will follow suit. A new study from Harvard questions the benefits of hardscape climate adaptation and finds that low-impact, low-cost projects have a much higher impact on embodied carbon and emissions reductions. This was in Common Edge. The findings for this are striking. Nature-based solutions deliver up to 91% lowered embodied carbon and average 30% cost savings compared with conventional approaches. And this is for green infrastructure for climate hardscapes. So basically building berms versus building culverts with concrete, building ways for water to wash away. Sponge cities, I guess, would be the best way to describe it for folks who know what a sponge city is. That's great. And for the folks who may not know, it's a way for cities to soak up water so that it doesn't all drain into the rivers and streams and lakes and all that stuff too fast, and so it creates flooding situations. So what it does is allows the cities to soak up water and then release it slowly so that it doesn't cause a flood event. And green infrastructure is way better at this than gray infrastructure, gray being concrete and gray being limited in the amount of absorption that can happen. And finally, there's a couple more. A judge has ruled that Department of Transportation can't stop congestion pricing given the terms of the agreement, and the previous administration stated that only New York could end tolling. This was in Streetsblog, New York City. So the judge said the agreement says only the city of New York and the state of New York can stop this. No other folks can get involved. And so, take that, Duffy. New research from the University of Texas at Arlington shows that through a meta-analysis that autonomous vehicles are likely to increase VMT across the board almost 6%. This is bad news for planners who believe that reducing auto miles will benefit our cities and the environment. This was in Vox. I also had a piece talking about the idea of rural AVs and stuff that David and Wes talked about on their podcast as well. Look both ways. So interesting to kind of cross-connect those things as they've been coming out. And then finally, to close the gap on local needs for housing and care infrastructure, Ski Town Telluride has built in a daycare in their affordable housing development. Other rural communities around the country are also looking to connect the two needs as the demand grows. So that was in Marketplace. Yeah, if you're going to build affordable housing, it'd be good to build affordable daycare too. And daycares are very specific. They need certain toilets, short toilets and places for the kids to play and eat and all that stuff. So if you can design it ahead of time, you don't have to retrofit it. And if it's part of the development, then you can have a place for the parents to drop off before they go to work. Really, really cool. Healthcare, childcare, care infrastructure, really important. Also, you all know that you can find my writing for the intros for the newsletter, as well as in the newsletter. If you subscribe to the newsletter, you get the intros as well as all the news items that we collect. But you can also find some of the writings where we talk about a lot of this stuff and more. And I kind of synthesize and break down stuff in more detail and with a more concise pen over at Patreon in the free section. If you're a Patreon member of the free Patreon, I'll post these intros and folks can get it, as well as that Substack where I also post these things. I probably should start posting them at LinkedIn as well on the intro. Yeah, there's too many places these days. Too much social media. Come on, there's too many of them. It's frustrating. Okay. This and every week, I want to thank our generous Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome and keep the show going by listening and supporting each month. This show and Talking Headways really wouldn't be here without it, so thank you very much. And you can support the show by going to patreon.com/theoverheadwire. $2 a month will get you some stickers and a handwritten note. $10 a month will get you in a bus-only scarf. $1 a month will get you this show and Talking Headways on Thursdays without advertising from the outside. Check that out if you get a chance. Patreon.com/theoverheadwire. Also, I do want to mention, as always, that we did produce an audiobook version of Raymond Unwin's 1909 classic, Town Planning and Practice. If you want to get your hands on one on your own copy, go to raymondunwin.com. It also can find it through your public library on Libby. We have posted them all over there, and you can get them from all over the world. So go to Libby or go to raymondunwin.com and download it as a podcast for your podcatcher. Okay, listener questions and comments. If you have a comment or question, feel free to tweet us or comment on any of the social sites where the podcast appears, or feel free to email us at theoverheadwire. So if you have any questions, shoot them over to theoverheadwire@gmail.com. If you have any questions, that you'd like to have on the air or you don't want to have on the air, let me know, and we'll put them on. We'll have the discussion. Puppies and butterflies. This is the part of the show where we talk about something fun, interesting, or maybe it just didn't fit in other sections. I want to say the Chinese New Year parade here in San Francisco is one of the best in the world, if I do say so myself, for San Francisco Pride. Yeah, so we went to the Chinese New Year parade. We took the J, and we had an early dinner and hung out on the street. It was beautiful weather for San Francisco. It was like in the 60s and 70s, even at nighttime, which is amazing because usually it's foggy. And then we watched the parade. And so all these elementary school kids from all the Chinese immersion classes went by. All the cultural folks. We didn't see Eileen Gu. Apparently she was there, who is representing China for the Olympic team, but she grew up in San Francisco and her mom's Chinese. She was the marshal for this year's event. I did see some elected officials and things like that, but it was fun. Lots of firecrackers, lots of dragons, lots of just happy people watching the festivities. It's always a good time of year. Previously to this current iteration, before the pandemic, actually, I was going with my friend Tim Halber and other folks around to do the Chinese New Year treasure hunt. So if you're ever in town, if you don't want to do the parade, I highly recommend the treasure hunt because it kind of shows you this part of San Francisco you don't really see. You go all through Chinatown, all through downtown, all through North Beach looking for clues, and they'll show you to all these things you might not have seen otherwise. Little things in the corners of alleys and little items on the ground, little artist things. It's really amazing. And so it's always been one of my favorite weekends ever since I moved to San Francisco, and even more so now that I can take my daughter to the parade, and she loves it. She had such a great time. She's been talking about it the last few days, And so I highly recommend it if you guys are in town, Chinese New Year parade, or do the treasure hunt. You'll find out something new about San Francisco, even if you've lived here for decades. All right, you can find me on Blue Sky, Mastodon, LinkedIn, Instagram, sometimes Threads, Substack, YouTube, and of course on my website and in your inbox every morning if you sign up for the newsletter. And on Flickr, we are known as Transit Nerds. Everything else is at The Overhead Wire. Thanks for joining us at Mondays at The Overhead Wire. Thanks to our generous Patreons for sponsoring this week's podcast. Chrissy and Tracy will be here next time, I hope. And so we'll see you in 2 weeks' time.
Talking